All right, everyone, in celebration of spooky season, I have a small effect here, and I'm going to just do a quick tutorial on it. Not necessarily that you would use this effect, although there's going to be a lot of different parts that you may find useful for other types of things in a comp, but just for sport. We were talking about eyes the other day. So here's pretty much this portrait. We have a skin turning more of a greenish hue, some eye effect happening, and it's just a photo here from Unsplash. But it's a fun little technique to use. So let's dive into the script. And really what I want to focus on in the first part, I'm going to show you how to kind of bust out the tree, and we'll talk a little bit about Nuke information and how information flows. And the second part of the tutorial, I want to talk about how we can use things like a multiply node or any node really with expressions, and we can drive different effects. So if we dive into this, let's go ahead and look at our full effect. For instance, I have a animated multiply slider here, but if I go ahead and break this connection, go ahead and break this connection, set that to no animation. There we go. All right, so now I have a effect here, and if I go down to 0, you'll notice I have one driver or one slider pretty much running an entire effect, right? So it's a pretty cool way to go about it. So let's dive into how we can get that to work. But first thing we have to do is get our effect working. So what I want to talk about really quickly here is how information moves down a pipe. So keep in mind our first part here is we have an image. Again, like I said, from Unsplash. So we've got an image from Unsplash here. We're going to dive in and add a reformat. And all that's going to do is I want it to work in a 2K square. So if I look at my project settings, again, I'm just working with the photo. I've got a 2K square, frame range 100, FPS is 24. So it's a nice little Instagram, size portrait square, if you will, 2048 by 2048. So I wanted to reformat that and put that into 2K square. So the very first thing to take note of is as information moves down our pipeline here, all of that information is being moved down with it. So for instance, this reformatted 2K, that's why when we jump down to our next bobble, it doesn't revert back to something like this. So it's sending transform information down the line. What else is getting sent down the line? Well, we have RGB information. So we have RGB information, alpha information, and anything else that's loaded in here. So if we needed to, we could shuffle things out and so on and so forth. So that's just something to note that as I come down this pipe, imagine this is a pipe. When I branch off, each one of these kind of elbows, if you will, is what they're called, is going to have that same information. So we're sending that same information all the way down all of these streams. And what that allows us to do is when we back out, is we can start to shape information and almost a subtractive. Some may consider this a subtractive compositing method. We're actually subtracting information out and then we're plussing it back in on the top. Over here, we're actually just manipulating information, but we're using masks, pulling from that original information to guide our grade nodes. In this particular case, here's an exposure node, a grade node, two grade nodes here, setup for the skin, just real simple setup. We have a glow here, which is doing some eye glow, and then our merge on top with a little noise plugged into the mask channel. All right, first things first, let's go ahead and take a look at our eyes. Let's go and move this in here. And when we look at our roto here, all I've done here is add these cute little U shapes. We're going to close this. So these cute little U shapes come from portrait photography. Comes from a portrait photography where we just add these kind of cute little shapes. And if I look at my alpha here, I'm going to go ahead and use just a simple edge blur on the alpha. And now you'll see that kind of uncrispies that. And we have these kind of cute little U's. Well, now I can use that mask information in a lot of different ways. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pump in a grade and I'm going to mask it. And what this grade allows us to do is then just kind of give some light or some information into the eyes there. Moving down the line here, we've got our alpha copy. And one thing I want to mention when we are using keyers and things of that nature, the reason you're going to see a lot of copy nodes, anytime you see me pull a key, you're going to see a copy node because what we want to do is, even though the key will give us a key or a roto will give us some information, what we want to do is we kind of want to use a copy node followed by a pre-mult, and that's going to keep our unaltered information from getting altered by anything here, right? So we're changing alphas. We're doing some stuff in this particular run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pump that into a mask. So all I'm doing is taking the alpha, not any color information. I'm going to bring it back to my RGBA here. We're going to swap the alpha. We're going to pre-mult it. So just as we work down this script, you will notice that will be a running case where we don't want to necessarily key something out and then just keep working down the line. If we are going to pull an alpha and have any color information, we're going to go ahead and copy that and use the color coming in. So now working down the line, I've gone ahead and I've pre-multed. Here's my grade node, just the eyes. So this is where the subtractive comes into play. With this now on its own channel, we're going to go ahead and set up a glow. And the way I do this is similar to a light wrap. If you watch the light wrap tutorial, we're going to have two different glows because when we think about lighting, the way light emits is we're going to have a diode in the center, right, no matter what, and then we'll see immediately a fall off. So that's kind of what we want to do here. Diving into our first glow here, this is going to be a higher brightness, lower saturation. We're going to kind of dial that saturation down and a smaller size. And that's going to give us kind of that initial illumination as we can kind of move our brightness back and forth. We can move our saturation back and forth, our size, etc. The second one is going to drive the outer glow. So what we want to do with this one, this is going to be a little bit lower brightness, full saturation is good, and a wider size. So now if we look at the difference between the two of them, you see I've got two different glows working together. We're going to go ahead and hit that with a merge max, and I'm going to take my softer glow and plus it on top of my inner glow. Because again, this is that diode, this is the initial burst of light. And then from there, we're seeing that light come out. So this is going to be glow, in this case, glow 4 and glow 3 working together. Sliding down the line again, as we work down, we're going to have a color. And this is where we're going to get right into our first driver as far as color. So if I double click on our color, you will notice that our color is being changed with a gain slider. If I pop into our gain, I'm using the temperature, the TMI slider here, and all I'm doing is popping it to blue. I go super blue, I can go super orange, and I can use my magenta and my green to move away. So maybe we do push this to blue. But if you kind of slide down, you notice as I change this color, that constant down there is also changing with it. And fun fact, so is this glow to the right. Well, what's happening there? Well, let's dive into our first setup. So I've moved my grade here, and then now what I'm going to do is I just want to take a constant of the same color and add just a little bit more of that soft light. That just gives us a tiny bit of work there. And then with this soft light, I can go ahead and mix it in. And I have a lot of flexibility, but instead of coming in here and picking the color and then going down here, what I can do is if I double click on my constant and come in here and I hit set, or excuse me, edit expression, what I can do is then from there, I can go ahead and grab our color from here and populate it into that box. And you'll notice it says grade 3 white, but I have all this extra information. So to get rid of that, we're just going to go ahead and hit boom. And you'll see that this is 4 channels. So it's driving all 4. You will originally get a single box, but it will drive all 4. Just make sure you're driving all 4. I'm going to hit cancel. So that color here is driving the color for my constant. And if I hit Alt E as in Easter, you notice I have quite a bit of expressions rolling down the line here. So I've got, I don't know, it's kind of a spaced one attached to that gray glow. I'm not sure where that came from. But I have an eye color here. It's working out great, and now it's driving this. And notice the same exact setup is over here on this glow, which we'll get to in just a second. From there, I'm going to go ahead and merge this over, and let me go ahead and disable everything down here on this tree so we can get an accurate look. And I'm going to hit Alt as an E as an Easter, an accurate look of where about we are right now with this effect. So we've got a pretty cool, very vibrant eye looking effect. And then again, I can change this if I want orange, more of that gray color. I can really have some fun with the different color options that we have. So we can do a lighter green, etc. It kind of is to preference as far as what you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and dial this down. I kind of liked where I was. So I'm going to go and just pull this, make it a little bit more natural, a little bit more towards the lavender, right? Lavender, cyan. So we'll kind of push it more towards the lavender, a little bit more of that blue. All right, coming down the line, well, a few things are happening with these eyes lighting up. The very first thing that's happening is there's going to be a little bit of a glow radiating off of them. So that's where we jump in with our glow. And the glow is very simple. And you'll notice this is a free, kind of a free mask. And what am I doing with this free mask? Here's my alpha. Let's go ahead and go to my glow, hit Q, and you'll see it's just a simple 2-circle alpha. Again, we're going to go ahead and blur that out. So we get that nice soft radio fall off of the intensity of the thing. And we're driving that glow there. And again, the glow is being run by the color driver, which is over here, art grade number 3. And I can adjust my size, etc. So if I want it a little bit bigger, I can do that. And the reason I'm going to put that in front of this is that way when this one takes over, we're not adding additional glow on top, although we could do that. To taste, you could layer this like a sandwich over here, and you'll get an additional glow on top of the eyes, which maybe that's what you want. It's kind of up to you. I actually kind of like it in this position, so I'm going to go ahead and just shuffle it down. And again, what's great about the glow here is I still have a mix and so on and so forth. So I can kind of drive that as I want. The next thing, sliding down the line, is we've got this kind of cool eye effect happening. I can change the color, but what else can we do? Well, let's say this is more Game of Thrones-y, where, this, like that kind of the Winter Walker, or the White Walkers, I believe is what they were called. Don't quote me on that. It's been a minute since I've read the books, and even, well, a minute since I've seen the series, and even farther back since I've read the books. But we can do a couple things. Let's start with some cool spooky skin effects here. So the first thing is I'm going to just grab an exposure, and I'm going to gang this down, and I've animated this, and here's why. When this light effect pops up, the camera naturally, if it's set to like an auto exposure, would actually expose down to keep up with the light emitting there. So what I've done here is I actually have a mix. If you look at my curve editor here, and I've mixed the exposure in with the rest of the effects. So that's, as this animates through, you'll notice as the lights come up, our exposure kind of comes down a little bit. All right. The next thing down here, this is just, so if Game of Thrones is not your speed, it's currently October 2021, and Dune is just about to come out. Maybe you want to slap on a Dune effect here. Same thing here. Let's just keep it where everything is. And you just take a roto here. So again, I'm just moving my information to the right now. Here's my roto around the eyes. There it is, a little edge blur, and I'm just driving a grade node, and all I'm doing with that grade node is cooling off the inside of the whites. Now, you probably wouldn't do this with Nuke in a film pipeline if you wanted that effect. You'd actually just use this in DaVinci. And the reason is because in DaVinci, you can get a really good track on those eyes pretty quickly. But then again, you may, with blinking and everything else, you may end up using a compositing software for that. But this is just one of many ways I would actually track the eyes in Mocha Pro if I wanted that kind of blue under eye look. or track it in Mocha, and then I could animate it with, the eye blinking and so on and so forth. So I just called this grade Dune. It's really subtle, but you can see we start to get that kind of glowy look. And if I wanted to multiply them up or make it more saturated, I have all that control. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that one off for a second. Sliding down, to give it more of a sick feel, we're just going to add some under eye, just a simple grade. This is just a little bit of a multiply here, just multiplying down those already existing shadows. And we can push that effect a little bit more if we need to. And same thing here. These are just using rows right off the thing. And this roto here is just got a feather on that. So it kind of starts dark and feathers away. And keep in mind, I'm just using that edge blur just to soften out those edges. All right, let's talk about the skin real quick. So with the skin, I'm actually going to come up to our luminance key here. And what I want to do with the luminance key is I want to kind of focus most of the effect, because all I'm really doing is desaturating, adding a little green. Focus it mostly around the skin here, and I do have control to kind of adjust how and where that effect is going to land based on just a simple luminance. And then just with the blur, you'll see that affects most of the skin now, and I can kind of dial that back and really get it to feel kind of nice. And then sliding all the way down, we have our first grade node, which this grade node right here, we're just going to go ahead, we're adding just a touch more green. We could do a touch more green. I actually ended up going with a little bit more of a magenta to keep that kind of natural skin tone that was really well done by the photographer. So we've got that going on for us. And again, I'm using the same mask here for just a desaturation with the saturation node. So now we're desaturating the skin and cooling it off a little bit so it feels sickly. Okay. And that's pretty much where we're at. Let's talk about the plus here. So again, I've got all my eye effect. I'm moving into a plus here. And notice I've got a mix slider there. And it's feeling pretty good. But another cool thing that we can do with the eyes here is if we add a noise into the actual mask channel. So if we look at my noise here, what we can do is we can push this effect a little bit farther. And you'll notice as I move my Z around, you'll see this kind of cloudy movement in the eyes happening. So all I've done here is just and if you look at our dope sheet here, close that, let's reopen that. You notice I've got a couple keys here. One I just added on accident. So 1 to 40, and all it is I've animated the size, and then I've just animated that Z just to give that little bit of push and kind of vibrance that's kind of giving us that extra little pop there. All right. And moving on down, there's our glow. And then down here, before right node, this is a small, quick technique. And all I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm blurring out the shot just a little bit. And if we notice, if we come back up to our original here, we have this nice crisp, we can see all the follicles and stuff like that. But when we're making the skin a little bit more sickly, and just to give it that kind of more old Halloween spooky effect, we're going to just a little bit of blur, and then we're going to merge that blur back in, but we're going to use a different type of merge, which is going to be our dissolve. And if we take a look at our dissolve, you will see that which is put on. So we have 0, which is the information coming in, and then we have 1, which is the blur. So if I go all the way to 1, you'll see I've got this real soft blur. But what I can do is I can just dial that in just ever so slightly. And what that does is it gives us almost like Vaseline on the lens type of soft, just a nice soft blur. And you can use this effect for a lot, but it really just does a nice little kind of pixel to pixel blur there, which gives us a cool little effect. It's subtle, but it's nice. All right, let's talk about how we can animate this effect altogether. So what I've done is I've just called in a simple multiply node. It has nothing attached to it. And the reason I just picked multiplier is because it's a simple value, 0 to 1, and I have a mix. Doesn't really matter what you put in there, and there's a lot of different ways that you could set this up, but I like just this single node here. So Let's take a look what I can do with that. So let's start with our initial, which is our dune. And for sport, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you how this is done. So if I grab like a grade node, for instance, or even a saturation or anything like that, I'm going to pop this grade node in here, and let's say I multiply it all the way down. So now it's just the eyes. Spooky, spooky season. And I can set my effect up, and then I'll just use the mix to kind of dial how much power it has. Well, if I wanted to animate that from this particular driver, there's a lot of different expressions that you can use. But in this case, I really just want the mix to be driven by one particular slider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just populate the gray node on top. Let me go close this again. Gray node on top. And then I'm going to just grab my driver. So here's my driver with my mix slider, and here is my mix slider down here. So what I can do is if I go click in here and I go to edit expression, you can then left click and drag. You'll notice when I pull it out, you'll see Nuke files multiply one mix. And the first thing that's going to pop up when I drop this in, it says error, unexpected semicolon or colon, I believe that is, and Nuke values. So we know that this expression is not working because if the expression is working, it's going to deliver us a number. So what we're going to do is slide that out and hit delete. And now we have multiply one dot mix. And notice I've got our 0.4 value, and then I hit OK. And then as I mix the multiply, you'll notice that will mix it as well. So that's pretty much it. And then what I can do is I can copy and paste that and paste it exactly in where I want it. Now, notice I added a negative 0.1. Well, it's simple math, so why would I want to do that? Well, I actually kind of want the eyes to light up first. So that's where this driver is right here. So this driver is going to be 1 for 1, or should be 1 for 1. This and this multiply here, if I take a look. All right, 1 for 1. But I actually want the skin and everything else to go a little bit slower. So to do that, I can jump into here and I can hit edit expression and I can add extra stuff to it. So in this case, hey, take the value of multiply number one dot mix and minus it by -2. What's that going to mean? Well, when this mix slider is 100, we're only at 0.8. But what that allows for is just the smallest little delay where we have our eyes coming in first, followed by our skin, and then vice versa. So once that's all set up, we've got our expression running our dune, our under eyes, our skin, our mix here, with a little bit of noise. Our glow color is coming off of this, and it doesn't look like this one's being animated, but it's really only over the eyes, so we don't really need to set that expression up for the mix. But for the purposes of keeping everything concise, let's run through that one more time. I'm going to go ahead and double click that and that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my mix, hit edit expression. And say you only wanted to mix it by half. Well, that's where you could do multiply 0.5, or if you wanted to mix it more, you could add or multiply or any other sort of math. I'm just going to left click and drag from the multiply, delete multiply. And that is it. And I want it to be 1 for 1 because it's an eye effect. But I could do maybe like 0.02, just so it has the small, even just a tiny bit of delay. And then now you'll watch that glow will kind of populate in with the rest of the eyes. And when you're done with that, you don't want to look at all these green ones. You can hit Alt-E as in Easter. And keep in mind, our nodes are telling us a lot of information too. So just to wrap this up, let's talk about the node real quick. We've got R, G, and B, so red, green, and blue. The little E is letting us know that there is a expression there, which means it's attached to something. And that way, if we're looking at it, here's another one. It's got a little white, which means it's alpha. And you can kind of see just in here different things. That little white dot lets us know something else is into that node. And I won't get into all the specifics because there are a lot, but just so you can see that little tiny E is what to look for, letting us know that it's being driven. And at the end of the day, we'll end up with this kind of fun effect. Let me go to the final. This one doesn't have the dune eyes, but here it is. And that's about it. So we have this kind of crazy, almost portrait shifting kind of feel. The eyes are coming in. They've got that little effect swimming in and so on and so forth. So I hope that helps. just kind of dive into some fun things that we can do here in Nuke, kind of celebrating the spooky season. I hope you have a